afternoon. How's everyone doing? Nice. It's 2 o'clock. We're ready, right? Okay, my name is Evren. I'm the Director of Product Management in Data Analytics Organization in Google Cloud. And today I have my guest, Michele. She will join us in a few seconds. If you want, you can come up here too. Yeah. And today's topic is data governance in this world. And we got a lot of questions yesterday, even during my presentation for streaming analytics. One of you have asked, I think you're there. Thank you. I love that topic. This is something we're going to talk about probably at length over the years. But I wanted to start what we're going to discuss today. And Michele is going to cover a lot of insight for you guys. I'm really excited to have her here with us. And we're going to talk about what data governance is, what companies are doing. In the end, I'm going to little cover about what we're doing on Google Cloud to help you really deal with your world and how these things can be actually enabling capabilities to grow your businesses. So let's talk about data. Data is getting bigger and bigger. I think I mentioned this yesterday too. By 2020, every one of us in the world, every second, will produce about 2 megabits of data every second. That's a lot of data. Sum them up. There's about 8 billion of us. That's quite a bit of them.
That's a lot of data.
Look at all those things that we're seeing today. There are businesses being built around us, but still we're scratching the surface of what we can do with data. Either we're not ready, either we're afraid of it, or we don't have the right tools for it. Who remembers the V's of the data, the big data? Remember? Velocity, variety, volume. Those three things are still kicking really, really high. Take a look at the volume and variety. It's tripling. Fantastic for us because you can take this data and generate some great insights for your businesses. But if you're not prepared to deal with it, that won't help you. Look at the velocity. It is shaping up immensely. Yesterday, we talked about streaming, and I had a partner on stage with me, A/B Tasty. They were talking about how they were utilizing this real-time data to generate revenues for their customers. You can do the same. If you can harness how you can use the data, if you can turn governance into revenue-generating mechanism for yourself. We are seeing businesses building data and events-driven structures for themselves. You can do the same. We have the platform for you. We have the means for you. There are a lot of things that we're learning. But I said, we're not really using all the data available in hand. Take a look at this. Only 1% of the unstructured data is in use. Only 1%. If you look at the 50% of the structured data is still sitting and not being used for decision making, we're leaving it. We're leaving value behind us. What will it take for us to really get there? I think all of us know why we can't do this, right? It's complex. Data is distributed everywhere. Lots of legacy applications, silos. We may not have the talent, but there's still a way. What do you think?
Well, we have to address people. I know. We have to address people. What do we really want? We want to be able to use it. We want to be able to interact with it. We want to be able to play with our data. But our experience around our data is really, we struggle with it. We struggle with it on a small data scale. And if we struggle with it there, we're going to struggle with it on a big data scale. Who owns the data?
All right, let's some guesses. It has to be interactive. Who owns the data?
Who owns the data?
Good. All right, that's one way. Collectors. Okay. Do you own your data?
No.
Company owns the data?
These are way better answers than what I usually get.
That's good. See,
we have smart Googlers in the room. A few years ago, we started asking the question, who owns the data? Looking at it through the lens of saying, where's the data strategy sit? Where does governance sit? Where does master data management sit? All things that help us better understand and take advantage of our information to make decisions, to grow our revenues, to create great customer experiences. And data decision makers, what did they say? IT owns it. 50% of them. IT, take care of it.
Who's in IT here?
All right.
Do you own the data?
Do you want to own the data? No. No.
Great.
So what do we do? So that was back in 2015. In 2018, we asked the question again. And what did the data decision makers say? They said IT still owns it, and more of them said that IT owns it. So what does that actually mean? I mean, you said who created it, where does it come from, who's taking care of it, and it really boils down to this. I want my data to work. Stop frustrating me every time I go into my application, every time I go into my business intelligence, every time I'm trying to run analytics, every time I'm just trying to figure out who my customer is so I can have a grand old party, right?
Don't lock your data.
Don't
Make it work for you.
lock it up. Make it work for you. And when they talk about, or when our respondents talked about IT owns the data, it's because the complexity of it is a nightmare. It's what we deal with every day. We need to simplify it. So what we're going to do is now take this to data governance, because data governance really is that accelerator to make it happen. Do you believe that?
And she will convince you guys
Yeah.
how data governance is an accelerator for the business.
Accelerator. So let's introduce you to data governance first.
There we go. So if you look at data governance, little history. If you go back, some of you are coming from the very highly regulated industries. Back in 2007, it was specific to the departments. Very specific. In 2008, if you remember, there was this crisis. Lots of regulation around the financial data. What can be done, who can be done, very prescriptive. Remember those days? Things have changed. But if you look at today, where we are, GDPR happened, right, in Europe. In here, CCPA is happening. Don't be afraid of it. It's actually going to help you make more sense from your data. What's driving the governance in the data governance in the initiatives?
We want to connect to our customers, see who they are, get a customer 360. We want to control our data, protect ourselves, stay in compliance. We know that our regulators look at how we use data and the type of data that we're collecting to say how we're doing. We just don't feel like we're in control. It's that make that data work thing. If we don't have great experiences, how can we trust our information to make decisions?
Every one of them are actually asking about these things. The complexity of the data, lack of control, or maybe the perception of control, and how we can actually operational drive efficiencies around it, and risk management. These are all items that are driving the governance needs. Now, it is about policy, it's about people, it's about technology. Now, you may say, hey, I heard the same thing for other things too, but it's absolutely true. But there are specific cases that we can actually leverage and build together to really make this thing work for you. It is going to be driving the success.
Right.
How does it come to rescue?
How's it come to the rescue?
Yeah.
Well, data governance is like any other competency and practice in our business. People, process, technology. Sounds really boring on the surface of it, but it's that brain trust that comes together, where not only are you trying to drive down the complexity, whether you're trying to mitigate risk, but on the other hand, we do have strategies of getting value from our data. And we need policies that enable us to democratize it and to find those great insights. And so when we talk about data governance as that starting point for that value and accelerating our business forward, that's how we should really be thinking about our governance program. It's a strategic competency. It's not just...
Have you seen examples how people have operationalized it?
Oh,
is it a low ball?
Yeah, it's a low ball. Thank you.
Who does this thing well these days?
So I think John Deere has done some really interesting things.
Anyone in here in the world of where John Deere is similar to? Manufacturing, operations?
farming.
Okay, good. Well, maybe they'll take advantage.
All right.
There you go.
Let's tell a little bit of story about this. Just like every other company here, all of you here, governance is a nightmare. And when we've started on big data and predictive and prescriptive analytics, we don't want anything getting in our way. So what do? We grab the data we need, and we start analyzing it, and we build insights. This is what John Deere was really focused on. How do we help farming communities drive better crop yields? How do we better manage the finances around crop insurance, for example? And so they were just grabbing all of this IoT data off of their tractors, watching how those tractors were operating in the fields, how the seeds and the fertilizer was going, how the harvesting was happening, relating this all back to their customers and the finances to support this, as well as the dealerships who are helping with a lot of the fixes on the equipment. What happens, though? They ran into a problem. They weren't thinking about governance. They weren't thinking about what is the org structure of themselves in order to relate back to their customers and dealerships. They didn't have the proper master data around their customers and their dealerships. So you can think about how do you create all these relationships and really understand what information can I share or should I share with whom? There are things that agronomists don't want to share with the dealerships, or they don't want to share with their banks. It's very personal. And when you move equipment around in big farming areas, what happens? They don't just tractor down the street. You're not always stuck behind the international harvester. Sometimes they're put on flatbeds and they move. What happens when you move that tractor 50 miles and you're trying to figure out how your harvest is going? That's a problem. So a lot of data quality issues were starting to come up. So what they really did is they took a look at how they were moving forward very quickly. They were running a DevOps agile development practice, not thinking about governance as requirements. Now they start to bring those business requirements in that really drive the policies, the understanding about who their customers are, who their dealerships are, who they are as an org, understanding how their equipment runs. And it's not just this control thing that drives you away, but it actually brings the value back in. And so rather than struggling for another year with these practices, they're able to really drive forward very, very quickly because the information is trusted and the value of the insights really come together.
This is why we wanted to share some of these examples with you early on, because if you are on this path and start actually looking at it, down the road you'll start seeing, hey, we didn't really think about these. It's best to really consider what we need to do collectively as you're building your operations around data, around events, and what you want to do around big data, because governance is going to be your guide. Governance is going to be your help. It's going to be there to really help you accelerate some of the things that are coming in your way that you may not be considering it today.
So how do you start to look at this? Well, you want to have a vision for the future. You want a success story.
Absolutely.
You want to know what success looks like. So let's connect the dots between what information that we have.
Does it matter which industry to the other industry?
No difference.
No difference.
No
so they may not be
difference.
Farmers in here.
You don't have to be a farmer.
Okay, good.
You don't have to be a mechanic.
Okay.
You don't have to be an engineer. You can be all of those things.
But they have supply chains somehow.
They have supply chains.
They have systems that they run.
They do. They've got financial systems. It's your business. It doesn't matter. And everybody has a vision for where their business should go and what those objectives are. So build your success story around that. Start with, where are my business opportunities? How is data going to shape that for me? Where do I want to take my business forward?
That's true.
John Deere's example there is to push the envelope on not just being a farming equipment company. They want to help you do a better job at bringing products to market them yourself. And recognizing, being real about the challenges that you face, not just that you're missing information, but really holistically looking at how you interact and engage with that data and how you're going to put it to use. Look at the people and processes, the experiences around that data, from the point of bringing it in to the point of where it's being presented to the point where you're making decisions and taking actions off of that. Now you can start looking at a much more holistic solution for your data strategies overall, for the management of that, and taking into account the governance policies that are going to happen from it. And then it boils down to, how do I know I did a great job? How do I sell myself? How do I tell that story? How do I get that next promotion? It's, what did I do great from a data management perspective? What did I do great from a data governance perspective? And what did I do great from a business perspective? So you have 3 different points of view for every stakeholder that is part of delivering value. And 69% of companies who do this, who think from a business-led perspective, have data governance and programs, have data governance programs in place. So that doesn't look like putting the brakes on your business, does it?
They have grown.
And the way that you start to enable and drive culture change around that is, how do you know the data's good? Where do you put in these cues as you bring data in, as you're going to use it, as you distribute that out to your customers? You're looking at social mechanisms that say, I like my data, and you see the thumbs up. You see a star that says it's certified and it's managed and it's governed well, so I know somebody's taking a look at it and has a vested interest in my personal success with the data. And there's also cues from a governance perspective to say, are we hitting up against any regulations? Yeah. Are there risks from our data? So really thinking holistically around those success factors and metrics and KPIs and bringing that back into the experience to drive an appropriate culture around that.
No more reactive, much more proactive approach.
Exactly. It's social.
I know. It is all social. Yes.
Roles and responsibilities. Oftentimes we think of governance as, the big bureaucracy at the top. And we have our executive councils, and there's a lot of conversation. And then you say, what happens? Well, now I'm going to go fix the data. But really what we're doing is driving a hub and spoke culture around this. Having centers of gravity where expertise about the data and the value from the data is going to come in. And even looking at that directly at the endpoints of your organization. When you said, who's creating the data? They're stewards and custodians, not just creationists. They have a vested responsibility in ensuring that the information that they're collecting and bringing in not only works for them, but will also help drive things and continue to pay it forward to the rest of the organization. So when we talk about the experience of data and making data work, don't forget your end users. Don't forget the fact that nobody likes to jump through 17 different applications to figure out how to provide customer support when somebody's got a problem with their insurance policy and needs questions answered. And oh, by the way, I've been through that process, which is why I explain it that way. And when you're a data scientist and you want to go in and grab data and manipulate it and prepare it, that's great information and insight for the data teams coming back, where they have to now interpret and deploy those models and rationalize them against policies. Yeah. So building a mechanism for tribal knowledge to come through is what we talk about when we say a change in culture and bringing data governance to the edge of your business. Now, what happens? You need an awesome delivery team to do that. Who's going to instrument across infrastructure, your data sources, and your endpoints, from applications to devices to automation? We need engineering and data ops right within our chief data office. They are the masters of delivery, building the services and the pipelines that are going to deliver, taking, just like John Deere did, those data governance requirements and data requirements, mashing them together, and really thinking succinctly about where that drives into the solutions that happen.
The chief data officer that you saw is a trend. If you look at the next 18 months, last 18 months, that there's a huge tick. And you're going to actually see that continuing, because everybody is trying to figure out what their data strategy is, and they're trying to build their organization around it.
Exactly.
And each of those chief data officers are coming with the mindset of, okay, what do I do to get more value out of my data? That's exactly the organization they're trying to establish. I am willing to bet some of you are already in those organizations today.
Exactly. And you need that strategic leader, because the complexity around this, not only in terms of what you want to aspire to with your data, but how you operationalize that, not just from team and delivery, but holistically your program has to come out. Look at all these different processes that are driving towards outcomes, managing around both offensive and defensive responsibilities. Taking into account today more and more, especially as GDPR and CCPA have come on, and security breaches are, at record levels, security is brought into the fold. It doesn't just sit over here anymore. When you're moving into more complex data science and artificial intelligence capabilities, you are now tapping into historical archives of your data, turning cold storage into hot storage. What is the life cycle of that? How do you manage
Could you have used that data that was sitting there? Do you actually know the lineage of your data? Do you know if you can actually use that data? Do you have the process to identify all those?
Exactly. And so creating those policies, of recognizing what they are, communicating them, training the organization to do that. All these different policies are resolving themselves around those outcomes and objectives that you're looking at, both from a data governance point of view, as well as your business policies, as well as regulatory and risk management.
Did you see some instances where some good dynamic policy investments and companies are really actually integrating into their business practices?
So.
A few, maybe.
I think the oil and gas industry is amazing in the way that they think about this. It's very complicated on drawing oil out of the ground. So if you think about the complexity of their partner ecosystem to just build the drill to put down the well, and then run all of the management and maintenance off of that, handling inventory and parts. They really operationalize the data to the tasks. And so those policies have to balance against things like trusted networks to share information, ensuring that parts aren't coming from the black market and really are to spec and who they've purchased from, so they don't have a drill go down and lose $1 million an hour. So you can really see where policies, business policies, risk policies are all brought together just to bring oil to market. Or energy. I mean, energy, the same thing. If you're on electric cars, the same thing. Exactly. So policies are really coming together in that manner too. How do you deal with the complexity?
Wow.
My goodness.
Well,
Tech's got to take care of it.
Automation? Somehow we got to automate these things?
Somehow, some way. Without giving you too much credence, I mean, you kind of need a Google at the center of your environment. And why do I say that? We think of data and how you manage it around this notion of metadata.
Yeah.
How do we describe our information? How do we set policies around that information? How do we see ownership for that data? And where is it located? What's the lineage of it?
Discover where your data assets are.
Yeah.
To begin with, right?
It's just, the first thing we do is profile our information and capture all of that metadata. What does that metadata mean for us, though, is the bigger question. And so then our governance processes come in, and what do? We slap a glossary on top of it so that we put it into business context. Now we got an awesome data governance program where data governance and data management are all coming together, and we'll figure out how to connect all of our systems and make our services and pipelines flow, and we should be off and running to the races, and we're all set. But in the world where we have to change the experience, where democratizing data is much more important than it was in the past, where data engineers don't stop at bringing data into a data lake or into another type of repository, but they have to think about that delivery. They have to think about presentation of information. You need a marketplace.
Yeah.
What does that marketplace look like? So catalogs today start to become that center of the universe of not just describing the physical, logical, and semantic aspects of the data, not just housing all of those policies and ownerships and practices, but also becoming that point, both from services as well as direct access to information, so that you have, and I hate to say it, we're back to a knowledge center, guys. Don't
Smart.
twitch if you remember Lotus. It's so much smarter because machine learning is at the heart of it.
Exactly.
So all those social cues that we talked about earlier, you can see what people are sharing. Yeah. You can see what people like. You can see what people are changing. You can see what people are saying about information. And that's not just on the consumption side. That's your governance teams, and that's your data management and engineering teams as well. So it's really important to think about how do you bring together the metadata facet, the business glossary facet, and the marketplace and engagement, and build services that are not just about an ETL job or a streaming job, but look at the queries that are running against your information. Yeah. Look at the Python and R scripts that are coming out of your data science notebooks. All of that information really helps you understand not only what data you have and how it can be used, but where it's providing value. And this is my English muffin slide. I like talking about the nooks and crannies of where data lives. Don't just think that that metadata is only in your databases. It's everywhere. How do you manage, like, let's go back to the John Deere situation. How do you manage master data? Is that in an MDM environment? It could be a Kafka topic. Now you're distributing all of these definitions and models about your data across every piece of technology. Your catalogs have to be able to profile and understand and interpret and synchronize that information. It's really critical. This is how you can navigate your fabrics. This is how you have the appropriate oversight.
Don't just think about your apps and where the data is flowing through. Think about the assets. Think about the containers that you're managing. Think about all the servers that your data might be running through it. We really have to consider all that in your system. Mm-hmm.
Get started with it on a smaller basis. Think about your solution. Think about the pipeline first. Begin there so that you're continuously accumulating this information and starting to, I don't know if you're any gamers in the room. You know when you've got your game map open and it's all highlighted and you see a big light in the section of the map that you're in your universe, and then as you move around, the map starts to open up. Okay, not a lot of gamers here.
No, not
sorry. But everything becomes illuminated as you kind of move through, and that's what your catalog should be able to do and help you with. It should start illuminating iteratively through your data ecosystems. Lessons learned?
Go ahead.
All right. One size does not fit all. Your data has to fit the experience and the policies and procedures and culture of your organization. It can drive massive benefits when you tie it to those business outcomes, hopefully driving income, to deliver. There is a certain amount of centralization in the organization that is required. Somebody needs to have, has a purview over the entire landscape. That's really where that chief data officer comes in and drives some of the top-down priorities and objectives for your data, as well as making sure that the bottom-up is orchestrated appropriately. That's a tough job. It's complex from an operations perspective, as well as from the data perspective. It requires that different approach to empower the enterprise, that notion of tribal knowledge and tribal contribution to get that governance and culture out into the edge and bring that back in.
And there will be multiple tools. Don't be really locked into, I got to have one tool that does everything. There will be multiple services that you're going to put together. Think about the flexibility. Try to solve it around the problem that you have in hand. Pull one thread all the way out. Yep. See what we can actually do.
Exactly. And so measure it based off of the IT objectives, the governance objectives, and the business objectives. And that's ensuring that you're striking the right balance between what is the value your data is bringing, as well as protecting you on the back end from risk.
And don't think governance as compliance only. It's an enabler for you, what you're going to be doing with those capabilities for your business.
Yeah.
A few things we're doing today on Google. We actually announced just about all these things, so I can talk about it now. Some of you may have been using our cloud DLP services. No matter where your data is. You heard about our programs yesterday, Anthos. And you can actually use it on your on-prem hybrid facilities or in GCP. This is your data loss prevention. This is a fantastic tool for those of you who are concerned about masking the data. It should not be seen by others. You can actually train it. You've been possibly using it today. We announced our metadata management cloud data catalog. This is a capability that actually helps for you to discover your assets, metadata, wherever your data might be. And it's a capability that you can integrate with other tools that are available outside. It might be on-prem tools that you're using through the metadata exchange that you can actually achieve some of these things. These are all there for you to discover. On top of it, you can build some policy management systems, access control systems that you can build. You have an integrated identity access management that I am sure many of you have been using it already today, that helps you identify, create those policies, types of personas who can have what type of data, access where and when and how long. These are all things that you can do today. We have a very aggressive roadmap to really drive what we can help you with. There's a lot of things that we can provide you around the principles of who can access to what data. Many of you have come to us and said, hey, I'm dealing with this thing, and here are my PII data. I don't want anyone in my organization to have access, but I want my analysts to be able to do it, but just mask that data because it has PII data. I don't want to lose that side of that, but only those people who have access can actually control it. So we're providing those capabilities. And there's, of course, the table levels. There's, of course, the role levels. There's a lot of things in here. There's retention policies that you want to run or deletion policies that you want to run. Those are all part of our roadmaps that we're talking about in here. And we will be able to really provide you administrative tools that helps you, gives you knobs that you can actually provide solutions within your organizations, because you need those to be able to drive your policies within your organization, around your business, just as it fits for you. I love this quote in here. I can't reveal the name, but this was a former chief data strategist. And governance is like a maid that cleans up after you when you leave dirty dishes around. It's not a policing. It's not a cop. It's actually a service that helps things out. With this mindset, we can actually change a lot of the things. In the world of cloud, this is a little bit more complex. And we are going to be in this hybrid world where on-prem, multi-cloud strategies are going to come together.